Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you. And thank you for being here. So yes, as mentioned, I have a slide to introduce myself. I studied in the University of Rome, that's my hometown, and then did my PhD and postdoc in Denmark at Aarhus University, and then relocated to Munich, where I cover a teaching and research position at the LMU. And my research interests lay in the field of sexual selection. I'm particularly interested in trait evolution and mating system dynamics. And as anticipated, I use spiders and crickets to answer most of my research questions. So why sexual selection? Well, sexual selection is responsible for some of the most amazing traits we observe in nature. So male weaponry, but also ornaments have evolved to overall outcompete rival males and increase the male reproductive success. And it's not only about bright feathers and colors, but clearly males also evolved a wide range of behavioral traits, such as nuptial rituals or courtship songs that ultimately serve the same purpose. And what is most interesting is that sexual selection does not stop at mating. It actually continues after mating in the form of post-mating selection, where the competition is between different ejaculates to fertilize female eggs, and where the choice occurs cryptically from females that are selecting the sperm rather than the male phenotype. And therefore, we also have a wide range of behavioral, physiological, and morphological traits that ultimately serve to increase the fertilization success of the males, like bait guarding or sperm phenotype or mating plugs in some spiders. And what it is very important to keep in mind is that pre- and post-mating selection work together and jointly shape these complex phenotypes. So this is an issue that has derived in the latest years in a very nice review from Evans and Pago, where basically the stress is really into approaching the study of sexual selection by addressing both episodes and trying to understand how they relatively shape the male reproductive fitness and then how they actually act on reproductive traits. So within this very broad framework where I always try to keep these two jointly together in my work, I address questions on reproductive trait evolution and mating system dynamics. And today I will particularly talk about the mating system of the gift-giving spider. And the talk will be pretty much composed of 3 sections. I'll talk about gift evolution, gift properties, and also strategies. But before that, what are nuptial gifts? So what is courtship feeding? Literally, the definition would be the transfer of any non-gametic material to females at mating. So anything that is not basically sperm can be considered a nuptial gift. And here you see some examples, but clearly these are widespread across taxa, also vertebrates that I don't really focus on. But these gifts can occur in the form of collected prey donated to females, or in the form of nutritious substances like protein secretions donated with the ejaculate, or like in the snails as glandular secretions, or even salivary secretions that the females feed upon during mating. And they're roughly classified in exogenous, when they are collected from the environment, like food, and endogenous, when they are secreted from or produced from the males itself. They have evolved through 3, and I would say non-mutually exclusive routes. They serve as a male mating effort because they ensure mating and sperm transfer. They also serve as a paternal investment because the nutrients will ultimately affect the female fecundity. And they may also have evolved to avoid cannibalism from females. From the female perspective, they clearly provide a source of food, and therefore they are thought to have these direct fitness enhancing benefits. But what we need to think when we see these gifts and we observe the wide variety of nuptial gifts that exist is that they are basically a process of evolution between gift givers and receivers. So it's a dynamic co-evolutionary interaction between males and females that actually provide the rich variety of gifts that we observe today. Now in spiders, gifts are quite rare. The endogenous food gifts can occur in the form of the whole body of a male. If you're familiar with the redback spider, the males perform a somersault. So they jump, basically they flip into the mouth parts of the female and self-sacrifice themselves to a cannibalistic female. This is considered probably the most extreme form of nuptial feeding. Well, it's the whole body of the male that is eaten by the female. But they can also occur in the form of secretions from the cephalic area, where during mating the female is basically chewing on these or feeding from these secretions. In terms of exogenous gifts, they always occur in the form of prey wrapped in silk. And there are two families known to perform such behavior. So one is the Palearctic family, and another one is a South American family, where you can see the similarities, but these are hunting spiders, so they do not have webs, and the gift is food wrapped in a dense silk layer. Pisaura mirabilis is the system that I particularly work with. It is widespread all over Europe, very easy to find in meadows and bridging to forest habitats. It is very easy to keep in the lab, maintain in high numbers, and to do classic observational experiments in the lab, with the only, I would say, negative issue that the generation time and the development time is extremely long, and they're not ideal for cross-generational studies. And before continuing, I would just like to stress and acknowledge already now the work of several groups that have contributed a lot to this specific study organism, because I can really confidently say that it has become, throughout the work of these great scientists, it has become a model system for the studies of nuptial gift. So let's continue and let's talk about how the mating system actually works. So males hunt for a prey, they kill it, and then they wrap it up in silk. They carry the gift that is packaged in their mouth parts, and they start wandering around looking for a female. When they encounter a female, they court the female through a series of displays and courtship behaviors, and only when the female accepts the gift and starts feeding from it, then the male enters the mating position and the sperm is then transferred. So basically the mating occurs during female gift consumption. It has evolved and it has an evolutionary function that can be described as a male mating effort, because males without a gift suffer from decreased acceptance by females. And not only, they also suffer from reduced sperm transfer because of the sperm transfer occurring during feeding. The longer the female feeds on something, so if the gift is there, then the more sperm the male is able to transfer to the spermatica, so to the sperm storage organ of a female. And this is really important because these females all are polyandrous, so this has an important impact for the post-mating competitiveness of these males. However, there was a very interesting study that came out recently where it also shows that it also has a shield effect, because the gift itself protects the males from cannibalistic attacks of females. And as you can see here from this graph, with males without the gift, that court females actually have the highest rate of cannibalism if the female is poorly fed. So there is also then a component to the evolution of this trait that has to do with protection against aggressive females. From the female perspective, just as generally with nuptial gifts, we know that it has to do with female foraging motivation. And in a very simple experiment, we manipulated the hunger level of females that were virgin and already mated, and actually showed that females that are starved are more readily prone to accepting males and mating. So starvation plays a large role in this. While females that were well fed actually had a higher acceptance rates when they were virgin, but this decreased once they were already mated. And this actually led to a following question. So if females derive, so if foraging and feeding is a driver, females should also derive direct fitness benefits from eating and from feeding on the prey that males offer them. And this could be the mechanism that then maintains the mating system, which again I mentioned is polyandrous. So in other words, by mating with multiple partners, females also gain access to multiple food gifts. And this means that they can gain direct material benefits due to the nutrients, but also simply due to the sperm supply of these males. And this should translate in increased female fecundity. But clearly, by mating with multiple partners, they also gain a set of genetic benefits because different males would provide more compatible or better genes. So this could also maintain this mating system. And in one experiment done quite a while ago, we were actually specifically interested in testing the relative role of these two material and genetic benefits in a system where it is expected that there would be a large benefit from the feeding, so a large material benefit. So we mated females in 3 different groups, monogamously, so 4 times with the same male, 4 times with different males, so polyandrously, and we had a control. And clearly the number of matings, so 4 versus 1, would actually allow to detect any material benefit. But it was only the number of mating partners that would allow to detect any genetic benefit. And to our surprise, we actually found a very limited effect of the number of partners on oviposition rate, number of eggs, and female survival. We only found an effect on time of reproduction, meaning that these females were actually quicker, both the monogamous and the polyandrous, in laying eggs. However, we found a strong support for genetic benefits because we actually found higher hatching success and higher viability of egg sacs in the polyandrous group. Therefore showing that even though in this system material benefits would be the most, let's say, expected form of benefits, we do show that that mating multiply with genetically diverse males did have a strong impact. So to conclude on this part, the gift is a trait that is maintained by sexual selection. It does not seem to have an important a role in terms of paternal investment, so that it is not a striking food source that affects female fitness, but it does serve to avoid cannibalism, and it does serve as a male mating effort. In terms of evolution of the gift, it may likely have evolved in the context of female foraging, and it may have likely initially provided females with direct benefits, but it is clear that then indirect benefits or genetic benefits have also kicked in, and both of these mechanisms are maintaining the mating system, so the polyandrous mating system. So the very interesting thing of the gift is that it serves a dual function. It serves to access females, so to increase the male mating success, but it also serves to increase fertilization success because it increases sperm transfer. And in a very recent study, we actually show that this directly translates to paternity success. So we genotyped the offspring of females that were mated multiply And therefore, we could actually resolve what is the relative paternity success of these males. And we showed that the copulation duration is a strong predictor. So it is very important in terms of competitive fertilizations. So the only way that these animals actually have to increase their post-mating competitiveness is to allocate to their gifts, so to their pre-mating trait. So they can prolong copulation if they bring a larger gift to the female. So if they're very good hunters, they could actually provide females with larger gifts and therefore extend the copulation duration. Or they could actually invest more in silk wrapping because the silk layer is digested by the female even before the female can enter the core of the gift. And that will also prolong copulation duration. And finally, another important key trait is to keep control of the gift. Because if a male loses the gift to a female, then there's no way that he can resume mating and that he can, in any chance, continue sperm transfer with that given female. And this actually leads to the evolution of a very puzzling and interesting behavior that we have renamed thanatosis in a sexual context in these animals. So these animals are actually able to perform a dead faint behavior. When the female is trying to pull away the gift, they stretch their legs, remain attached to the gift, motionless, and they are dragged around by the female. Only when she stops and she starts eating again, then the male somehow pops back to life and re-enters the mating position and continues sperm transfer. And this trait is extremely important because only those that perform thanatosis actually are able to increase the copulation duration and therefore their fertilization chances. So one of the most puzzling properties, though, is the silk cover in this system. Silk is very costly because it contains a whole set of very costly proteins. It is time-consuming. It will expose the animal to predation risks, not only while silk wrapping, but also while carrying this white parcel around. And most of all, in this system, it is not used for foraging or for web construction, as I already said. These animals do not feed like many spiders that wrap anyway their prey in silk and then eat afterwards. And we also know that there's no preference for silk-wrapped gifts. So if a male offers unwrapped gifts, just a fly taken and basically offered to the female, she will still accept it as likely as those that wrap. So it is a little bit of a puzzling trait to think of due to the extreme costs associated to this behavior. And we noticed that if a male is rejected by a female and he keeps on wrapping the gift in very close proximity to a female, he would actually then be subsequently accepted by the female. So we started to think a little bit about this behavior, and we wanted to test the idea that maybe what he's doing is either signaling that he's able to perform this costly behavior, such as an indication of good condition, or maybe he needs to deposit something, some chemical cues like that are freshly deposited on the silk in order to be accepted again. So we tested the idea that there may be some chemical attractants in this silk cover that these males might use to somehow stimulate the females in accepting them. So Michelle Bayer, one of my students, performed a very neat study where she actually looked at the silk, both from the cover of the gift, but also from the drag lines, which are basically these silk lines that hunting spiders leave while they're walking. And she tested, and she was interested in understanding also the modality, if any cue was present, so if volatile or tactile, simply by using large petri dishes where the animal could be exposed to the odor of different silk types, or could actually be able to sense through physical sensing the silk itself. And of course, she tested males and females. She used all possible combinations and controls. And what she found is that when we look at female silk, males actually respond to these cues because they spend more time on the side of the petri dish where the silk was present, and only if there was a tactile cue there. I mean, only in this mode of testing. And this pretty much confirms what we know from many studies where we see that males that are exposed to a substrate where a female was walking get sexually excited and they actually initiate gift wrapping behavior. So there is a component or a cue in female silk that elicits male sexual stimulation and has even an attractive kind of role. This was followed by a very small pilot study where Michelle also allowed a female to walk into a chamber and leave her silk drag lines. And then she placed the male right in the middle and actually wanted to observe whether he would follow the same direction of the deposition of the silk or not. And this may seem quite simple and direct test because we always think that these silk drag lines are used to indicate, to leave traces of where animals are actually moving. So for example, to indicate to a male where a female is. But we found, surprisingly, looking into the literature, that there's very little empirical test about this quite simple and straightforward idea. And what she did find is that actually most males move in the same direction of the female. So they actually follow the deposition, while only few remain still or moved in the opposite direction, with the idea that then the silk of females also somehow has a directionality information that is transferred to males and that is very important for mate searching. Because, as I said, these animals do not have webs. They really need to seek each other in the field. And the silk drag lines might be the actual modality for it. But back to our silk test. When we tested then the male actually silk, we did not find any response from the females. Not if it was a tactile or if it was a volatile test, indicating that actually females do not respond, at least in terms of attractiveness. Clearly our setup has a binary and very simplistic way of testing it, but at least they do not seem to respond to any information that is in the silk cover. So we are left with one main explanation, that the silk actually serves to increase the copulation duration. It has to be eaten, as I mentioned before, so it will prolong the mating duration, but also it allows male to have a better control of the gift, because when there is silk, males don't lose it so frequently to females that often try to steal the gift from males. So there is some very common type of conflict over who has the control of the gift parcel. Basically, this means that the silk cover and the silk wrapping should also respond to, let's say, changes in the competitive environment, such as any trait that is linked to sperm competition theory. This is a very simplistic model showing how animals or how males should invest in sperm when the number of competitors varies and increases. And we know that animals should invest more in their sperm if there's risk of competition, but this investment should decrease as the number of competitors rises, because the actual, let's say, payoff from this investment is lower due to shared paternity with rival males. So we tested this idea by looking at the actual investment into silk, so how much males wrap their gifts, and also into the correspondent amount of sperm that was transferred. And we did this by setting up a very simple study where we had a male present in an arena where our focal male was and our female was, so that basically there was always cues of a potential competitor that would indicate the risk of sperm competition. And when we looked at the male response, we actually found a nice effect on the wrapping duration and the sperm transfer, but instead of increasing their effort, these males actually decreased their investment. So they actually wrapped for less time in a competitive environment, and they also transferred less sperm. Now this may be explained possibly by males having to speed up on accessing females, so wrapping for shorter time in order to not to lose the female to a competitor male. But it may also indicate that the actual risk of competition is perceived at highest levels, at maximum levels. And therefore they respond by reducing their investment as if there were many competitors in the scenario, like the little graph showed. And this may be likely considering that when adults, these animals tend to cluster in small areas. So in the field we find a lot of adults in very small patches, and therefore the perception of competition may simply be extremely high. We also have data from molecular DNA parentage analysis showing that females in the wild actually mate with up to 4 different males, again indicating that there is actually a quite high level of polyandry and therefore of sperm competition. So to conclude on this part, the property that we are most interested in, the silk cover, actually is instrumental for maximizing sperm transfer, and it's not a target of female choice. Males do respond plastically to environmental change by allocating differently to silk wrapping, and it seems to be that under certain conditions, males might actually, for example, facilitate mate acquisition, so maybe more matings via faster gift construction rather than investing in competitive fertilizations, so shorter copulations for each mating. And one thing that is very clear is that these gifts have to impose some cost to males. Males basically miss a meal because they forego their own feeding to wrap the prey and donate the prey to a female. There has to be energetics involved because of hunting, of prey catching, of killing, venom injection, and so on. These are all costs, predation risks, and again, silk proteins. And we think that we were able to actually document these costs in a study that we conducted where we actually looked at survivor probabilities of males in the field in a plotted area where my student actually ran a mark recapture study. And I wanted to mention this because, first of all, it is possible even with such small organisms. It takes a lot of effort, and clearly the numbers are not extremely high, but we were able to recapture 120 males on a daily basis, basically not always all, but overall 120 males. So every male was individually marked, and we would score what strategy they would have, so if they would have a gift in their mouth parts or if they would be without a gift. And we also looked at their body mass every time we caught them. And then we simply returned them to the field in the exact plot that we have collected them from. And what you can see from this graph is that when males that do not have a gift actually survive, larger males actually survive better. So there's a condition-dependent, let's say, survival probability, so that basically males with larger body mass simply do better. But when they do have a gift, we actually find the completely opposite trend, meaning that with increasing body mass, they actually survived less. And we interpret this finding as most likely these males having also the highest reproductive investment, so that males that are those that can afford hunting and gift construction are also those that will suffer from the most severe costs of survival. But these males have also developed a strategy to reduce some of these costs. And this is a gift, and if you open the gift, you might most likely find inside an arthropod prey, like a fly or any other little insect. But sometimes what you find is, like the figure on the right, is just pretty much pieces of exoskeletons, some plant parts, and pretty much dry carcasses, indicating that these might be food leftovers and, again, vegetation included in the little package. So one of our first questions was, do these males actually cheat females? Can they actually offer these worthless donations? And when I say worthless, I intend nutritionally worthless for the female. So we did a lab study where we allowed males to court females with either a protein-rich gift, so a fly that was raised on protein-rich medium, a normal fly, a worthless gift, which was actually in this case an artificial cotton ball that we gave the males, and no gift. And first of all, males do accept artificial objects and they will wrap them up in silk, so they are pretty much able to we are pretty much able to manipulate conditions and do all sorts of experimental testing due to this behavior. And as you can see here, there's no difference in what type of gift they offer to the females. The only ones that suffer from mate acceptance is those that go without any gift. And this may be explained by the fact that these packages all look the same. The female has no means for detecting if the gift contains a genuine or worthless content, because they're covered in this white, dense silk layer. However, the males that are able to cheat females into mating then suffer from shorter copulations. And this is most likely because the female digests the silk layer, but once it reaches the core of the gift, there's nothing to feed upon, and therefore she interrupts the mating sooner. So these males have a disadvantage post-mating, although they don't have any disadvantage in terms of mating success. So the next thing that we asked ourselves is, could these be maintained as two alternative mating tactics, this cheating and genuine, let's say, gift-giving? So a nice team of students actually set out a field study where they went out, collected all the males and collected their gifts, brought them back to the lab, scored their contents, and actually found a quite surprising result. So first of all, almost half of them contained worthless contents. So almost half of them were gifts of cheaters. And this was striking when we look at the weight difference between genuine and worthless gifts. But if I show you this picture, you can also pretty much see why this gigantic weight difference. We can find entirely just freshly killed caterpillars inside a gift, or just pretty much exoskeleton in worthless gifts. And by collecting hundreds of these gifts, we actually were even able to create a calibration curve where we could just weigh the gift and already pretty much assign it to a high quality or genuine or a low quality and worthless content. But another, I would say, surprising result was that they tested if male body condition was a predictor for the gift tactic, and actually it seems that it's not. And one of the main ideas was that most likely males cheat because they're not able to afford a genuine gift. But it seems to be that males can afford genuine gifts, but nevertheless produce worthless gifts. And this data was nicely replicated in a lab study where they actually manipulated males and they kept them on low and high feeding regimes. And again, here they instead measured the amount of prey loss from the prey given before gift construction, and they see that it doesn't really differ between the two groups. So males can actually equally afford any gift type, but nevertheless cheat. And an additional trait that they looked at during this field study was the silk cover. And what they found, both from the field and from the lab, is that males wrap the worthless gift in more silk. And this was very interesting, and most likely it indicates that they somehow compensate for the lower quality or lower reproductive value of the gift in terms of copulation duration that the male would obtain, by most likely adding then extra silk layers. This can inflate a little bit the gift content, and this can also mask better its content and allow longer copulations. But what is it that maintains these different tactics in the field? So we started to think about how we would predict these different tactics to occur along the season. And we imagine a scenario where at the beginning of the season, where females are unmated and the food availability is lower, it would be advantageous to actually not produce gifts, because these males would still be able to copulate. We know that also from lab tests where virgin females are more receptive to males that that court without a gift. And simply because there's low opportunity, because the food is more scarce. But then it would pay to then produce gifts and most likely feed upon the limited prey to make the best use of it. Then with increasing of the mating season, females become mated, so the sperm competition also becomes more intense, and due to increasing temperatures in the field, the prey abundance becomes also higher. Then in that case, one would expect males to switch, or at least to increase their genuine gift production and therefore be able to outcompete other males in sperm competition and make the best use of resources. But if the competition becomes too high, we would also expect a peak again of worthless gifts, because these also indicate lowest investment, so lowest effort in reproduction, which is expected when competition is too high. And I think I realize now that I did not say that every male can basically perform every strategy. So we do not have a cheater and an honest phenotype. But with these recaptures, what we could see is that the same male can pretty much go from cheating to a genuine gift. So this is not males, but this is actually strategies appearing along the season. So we ran another field study. This time the investment was way heavier because we monitored the population throughout the field season, so for a whole month, and the students went out there and collected all the males that they found with the gift, and pretty much did this in conjunction with setting up pitfall traps, sticky traps, and sweeping to look at resource availability, so to look at prey availability. And they also monitored the demographics of the population. So they would collect every spider in the field and then score males, females, juveniles, and so on, to get also the operational sex ratio information of the field along the season. And what you see here is that the proportion of gifts, so of any kind, do increase with time. And what they found was an effect of prey availability that impacted this increase, and also of female availability, meaning of the proportion of adult females appearing in the field. So it really seems to be that then having a gift is clearly affected by food resources, but also by sexual selection to some extent because of female availability. But when they looked at the worthless gifts, they actually saw that there is a decline and then again a little peak up in the proportion of these cheating gifts. And here the only effect that they found was actually of the male-male competition, so of the operational sex ratio, meaning that the more the population became male-biased and the higher proportion of these gifts would appear along the season. And this indicates that each tactic might maximize fitness under a set of circumstances, so a competitive environment and resources. But this last figure here really called for an experimental test. And what we're doing now, so this photo was taken pretty much last week, is that we have set up little tents with replicate populations of spiders on our university campus, and we have manipulated the sex ratio in these tents. And what the students are doing is actually a extremely high investment in terms of observations. Every animal inside the tents is individually marked, and they're trying to get as much data possible about the mating frequency of these animals and the gift tactic. And most importantly, we will allow also these animals to reproduce in these tents, and we're going to genotype the babies in order to also resolve the actual fertilization success, let's say, of each tactic. So this is clearly ongoing, but I hope it will give us some exciting results. And again, it's also a way to show you how easy it is to work with the system, also in a semi-natural, let's say, or semi-field setup. So to conclude on this part, worthless gifts are common, but they're not condition dependent. The gift tactic may likely be maintained as an alternative reproductive tactic that basically is affected by seasonal changes in food availability and in sexual selection. And the idea is that the changes in this competitive environment and resources might actually lead to males maximizing fitness with either one or the other tactic. But to conclude more generally, we show, or at least within this talk, I hope I was able to show you that these gifts have evolved in the context of female foraging. The males benefit from offering gifts that are genuine. They benefit in terms of sperm transfer, even though they're costly, so they benefit at their own expense. And the trait becomes selected by females. But then the males reduce some of these costs, so the nutritional cost of the gift, and that's when cheating might actually have evolved, but still fulfilling the female expectation, because the gift offering itself, that trait is still there. So once the gift quality is reduced, females will suffer from nutritional cost, and they may also be under selection to discriminate gift quality. But we know that the silk prevents that, and we also know that the females actually are resistant to any information that is given from the silk. So pretty much what we see here and what we observe may be an indication of an antagonistic arms race between deception and female resistance, and all this through the gift strategy and the gift properties. So we clearly have a lot of unanswered questions, especially on the plasticity of this trait and why and how it varies at the individual levels. Why do males switch constantly from one to another? And a lot of more questions would open on these reproductive trade-offs that we seem to be, that we spotted, or at least we think we have spotted in the wild. But most of all, I hope I have conveyed that this is a great system to answer questions on nuptial feeding, on deception, and generally on mating system dynamics. And with this, thank you very much. And of course, I have a lot of people to thank, but mainly you for listening.